Few criminal cases have shaken Colombia to its core like the savage murder of two innocent children in Itagüí in 2012. Blood pooled beneath their broken bodies while their killer walked free for months, hiding behind a mask of victimhood. The brutality wasn't delivered by a stranger lurking in shadows, but by hands that had tucked them into bed, hands they had trusted completely. This is the story of how a family's act of compassion invited a monster into their sanctuary, and the price paid in innocent blood. The Echeverry household represented something increasingly rare in our fractured world, a genuinely happy family. Janet and Wilson Echeverry had built their life brick by brick in the working-class neighborhood of El Aguisal, located in the southern part of Itagüí, Antioquia. Their love story began in the late 1990s when Janet was 22 and Wilson 21. Janet already had a son, Johnny, from a previous relationship, but Wilson embraced the boy as his own. Their family expanded with the birth of Andres in October 2000, a vibrant and focused child who brought immense joy to everyone around him. But the couple felt their family portrait remained incomplete. They longed for a daughter. 2 years later, little Tatiana arrived, completing their family circle. What made this family remarkable was the extraordinary bond between Andres and Tatiana. Despite their 2-year age difference, they were inseparable companions. Neighbors and relatives frequently commented on their exceptional unity. They shared everything: toys, dreams, and most memorably, their passion for music. The children particularly loved vallenato, a popular Colombian folk genre, and performed impromptu duets that filled their home with laughter and melody. Maria Naufarit Velázquez, known affectionately in the neighborhood as Doña Naufa, lived next door to the family. She recalls how the only noise from that household came from Andres and Tatiana singing and dancing to their favorite song, Mi Primera Cana. The siblings displayed none of the typical rivalry common among children. Even when sharing a bed, they never argued about space or position. They simply coexisted in perfect harmony. Beyond their mutual affection, Andres exhibited a fiercely protective instinct toward his younger sister. Despite his youth, he would boldly defend Tatiana against any perceived threat, regardless of potential consequences. He would often declare that he lived for her and with her, promising always to keep her safe. This idyllic family picture, however, was destined to be shattered in the most horrific manner imaginable. In mid-2011, a year before tragedy struck, Janet received a phone call that would unwittingly set tragic events in motion. Her younger brother, Edwin Fabian Pineda, had lost his job in the municipality of San Jeronimo and needed assistance. Without hesitation, the family opened their home to him, demonstrating the same generosity and compassion that characterized their approach to life. Edwin Fabian quickly integrated himself into the family's routine. To show gratitude for their support, he assumed responsibility for childcare duties when the parents were working. He escorted the children to school, supervised their homework, and accompanied them to catechism classes. His apparent dedication earned him the complete trust of Janet and Wilson. The children, too, formed strong attachments to their uncle. Tatiana was particularly affectionate towards him, while Andres developed a habit of engaging in lengthy late-night conversations with Edwin Fabian, sometimes talking until an adult had to intervene and remind them to sleep. For nearly a year, this arrangement functioned smoothly, with Edwin becoming an indispensable figure in the household. What no one in the family could have possibly suspected was that beneath Edwin's helpful exterior lurked a deeply disturbed individual harboring violent impulses. No one recognized the danger until it was far too late. Saturday, October 6, 2012, began like countless others in the Echeverry household. Wilson, adhering to his strict routine, woke at 3:30 a.m. to begin work at 4:30 a.m. Janet and Johnny also left early for their respective jobs, Janet at a confectionery workshop and Johnny at a nearby business. Before departing, Janet had a brief exchange with Andres, who had awakened and asked for money to buy candy to share with friends. She gave him what she had in her purse and reminded both children they needed to be ready for catechism class at 10 a.m. Tatiana was still asleep when Janet left. Edwin Fabian, who worked as a construction instructor nearby, informed the family he wasn't feeling well and would stay home that day. This seemingly insignificant decision would have catastrophic consequences. When Wilson and Janet returned home later that day, they encountered a scene of unimaginable horror. They found Edwin Fabian tied up in bed, apparently beaten. Wilson's immediate reaction was to untie his brother-in-law, assuming a robbery had occurred. Once freed, Edwin muttered hoarsely, "The children! The children!" Following his gaze, the parents made a discovery that would forever alter their lives. In the adjacent bedroom lay the bodies of Andres, 12, and Tatiana, 10, their heads brutally battered, lying in pools of their own blood. The parents desperately checked for signs of life, but it was immediately clear their children were gone. Screams of anguish brought neighbors running to the scene, followed closely by police. Officer Andres Vargas, responsible for security in the area, was the first law enforcement official to enter the Echeverry home. After discovering the bodies, he immediately notified the Technical Investigation Body, CTI, of Medellin and arranged for Edwin Fabian to be transported to the hospital, as he appeared to be unconscious. Investigator Luis Fernando Correa was assigned to the case, receiving the official notification of a double homicide in Itagüí on October 6, 2012. He and his team promptly arrived at the crime scene to examine the evidence and begin unraveling what had occurred. In the second bedroom, CTI agents found the children's bodies in disturbing positions. Andres was slumped against the wall, while Tatiana lay on the edge of the bed, half her body hanging toward the floor. Preliminary examination revealed both children had suffered severe injuries to the occipital region of their heads, on both the right and left sides. The wound characteristics indicated they had been inflicted with a blunt object, though no weapon was immediately located at the scene. The Echeverry home was cordoned off, with only CIGIN forensic personnel granted access to collect evidence. The investigation team, led by Sergeant John Diaz, made several critical observations. The floor of the children's room was covered with water mixed with blood. Bedding, pillows, and other items were soaked with a reddish substance. Blood spatters were also found on the walls and ceiling. Forensic experts collected more than 20 blood samples from throughout the house, including the floor, bathroom, and ceiling. All contaminated items were properly packaged and sent for laboratory analysis. Just as evidence collection was concluding, Diaz and his team discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon. Under the bed, they found homemade weights, crafted from tin cans filled with cement, covered in blood. These were sent to the Medellin Legal Medicine Department for examination. The day after the murders, Edwin Fabian regained consciousness and provided his first account of the events. According to his testimony, that morning he had opened the door unsuspectingly when two men in black jackets, wearing gloves and pantyhose over their heads, appeared suddenly. One of them allegedly drew a revolver and, without saying a word, struck Edwin repeatedly on the head with the weapon's handle, rendering him unconscious. Authorities were immediately skeptical of this narrative. The Echeverry Pineda family had no history of threats or connections to criminal groups. They were a humble, hard-working family with no known enemies. There seemed to be no plausible motive for such a brutal attack. Investigator Luis Fernando Correa noted that the home's location raised further questions about Edwin's story. The house was situated in a narrow alleyway where any stranger would be immediately noticed by neighbors. Additionally, the children typically played in the corridor and would have noticed unfamiliar individuals approaching. Janet was the first to articulate suspicions about her brother's account, repeatedly questioning why her children had been murdered while Edwin remained alive. To her, the only possible explanation was that her brother had some unknown problem for which her children had paid the ultimate price. Her suspicion was not widely shared within the family initially, as Edwin had always been regarded as responsible, educated, and respectful. Nevertheless, rumors began circulating in the neighborhood about possible revenge against Edwin, prompting Wilson to take precautions. Fearing for his brother-in-law's safety, he asked Edwin not to attend the children's funeral, concerned someone might attempt to kill him during the ceremony. With authorities' support, Edwin Fabian temporarily relocated to the municipality of Cañas Gordas in Antioquia, where he remained for several months while following the case developments. As the investigation intensified, Luis Fernando Correa interviewed numerous neighbors, hoping to gather valuable information. He quickly noted contradictions in the various testimonies, with each person offering a different version of events. Several residents expressed doubts about Edwin's story of masked intruders. One detail particularly caught investigators' attention. The gate to Janet's house produced a deafening noise when opened or closed. Nafa, a key witness, questioned how the alleged killers could have entered undetected. Furthermore, if two masked men had indeed entered the alleyway, why hadn't anyone seen them? Why were there no screams or calls for help? The case took a decisive turn with a key discovery. According to Edwin Fabian's testimony, the crime occurred Saturday at 9:30 a.m., a time when neighborhood activity was intense and many houses had open doors. However, after interviewing several people with whom Edwin had spoken that morning, investigators began questioning his version of events. Edwin had risen around 6:15 a.m., and when Janet asked if he was going to work, he said no, claiming he felt unwell. Yet shortly after 7 a.m., he visited his mother, Marta Doris Garces, telling her a completely different story. According to his mother, Edwin had a cup of hot chocolate, collected his lunch, and left saying he was heading to work. Later, investigator Luis Fernando discovered another inconsistency. That same morning, Edwin had called a co-worker, saying he couldn't come to work because he was at the hospital with his sick mother, a third conflicting account of his activities that morning. 3 months after the murders of Andres and Tatiana, forensic doctors made a decisive determination. The blood found on the floor and in the bathroom of the house belonged to Edwin Fabian. This irrefutable evidence completely discredited his testimony. Forensic analysis confirmed that no blood or DNA from anyone other than Edwin Fabian and his niece and nephew was found in the house. For CTI investigators, it seemed implausible that the supposed masked killers would have left no trace in such a violent and complex crime scene. Another finding particularly caught the agents' attention: a trail of blood droplets extending from Edwin Fabian's bedroom to the children's room. During their inspection, they found a mirror hanging on the wall and, directly beneath it, 3 drops of blood on the floor. To investigators, this indicated that whoever left those marks had looked in the mirror after self-inflicting injuries. Moreover, the blood in the path between the 2 rooms suggested that Edwin had walked between them after the crime. From the beginning, Edwin had claimed that after being struck on the head, he had lost consciousness and remained unconscious all day. However, forensic evidence demonstrated otherwise. The bloodstains indicated he had moved around inside the house, casting serious doubt on his version of events. By this point, investigators had practically dismissed the existence of the 2 masked men Edwin had mentioned in his testimony. Each new piece of evidence pointed to him as the primary suspect in his niece and nephew's murders. Despite this, his family resisted believing him guilty. His sisters, including Janet and Rocio, defended him firmly. To them, Edwin was a kind, extroverted, and affectionate man, incapable of committing such an atrocious crime. The weight with blood traces, believed to be the murder weapon used against Andres and Tatiana, contained fingerprints. When compared with the database, they were confirmed to belong to Edwin Fabian. This discovery surprised the experts and placed Edwin at the center of the investigation. Now he would have to explain how his blood and fingerprints ended up on the object used to murder his niece and nephew. But this wasn't the only inconsistency in his version. Investigators found new reasons to doubt his account of the supposed masked attackers. One of the most revealing details was the cable supposedly used to tie him up. When he was found, the knots were loose, meaning he could have untied himself at any time. Additionally, there were no marks on his wrists that would indicate he had been truly immobilized. This led investigators to conclude that Edwin had tied himself up to reinforce his alibi. It was also discovered that the wounds on his body did not correspond to a violent attack but were likely self-inflicted to simulate an assault. With substantial evidence against him, his blood in various places throughout the house, his fingerprints on the murder weapon, and the lies in his testimony, the prosecutor's office requested an arrest warrant on February 20th, 2013, 4 months after the murders. That same afternoon, CTI agents traveled to Cañas Gordas to apprehend Edwin Fabian. They intercepted him as he was moving along one of the municipality's roads. To the investigators' surprise, he did not resist arrest. After his rights were read to him, he was transferred to the prosecutor's office in Medellin. Following his capture, Edwin Fabian was imprisoned in the maximum security prison in Itagüí, where he awaited the legal proceedings. The trial began on May 27, 2013, with Judge Ángela María Patiño presiding over the case. During the hearings, the prosecution, represented by Germán Darío Giraldo, sectional director of prosecutors in Medellin, presented the evidence gathered during the investigation. Edwin Fabian was provided with a public defender, whose defense strategy focused on questioning the validity of the evidence found in the house. However, he could never justify why no neighbor saw the alleged masked men, nor explain the multiple contradictions in his client's testimony. According to the investigator's hypothesis, Edwin took an artisanal weight, an object he frequently lifted, giving him sufficient strength to manipulate it easily. In the early hours of October 6, 2012, he approached the bed where his niece and nephew slept. He first pressed Tatiana with his foot, then struck Andres in the head. As the children were asleep, they couldn't react. After attacking Andres, Edwin struck Tatiana again, leaving both lifeless on the bed. After 21 months of trial, on November 24, 2014, Edwin Fabian Pineda received one of the harshest possible sentences, considering his victims were 2 minors. He currently serves a 54-year prison sentence in the maximum security prison in Itagüí for the murder of his niece and nephew, Andres and Tatiana. What drove Edwin Fabian to commit such an atrocious crime? For the prosecution, the only possible explanation lay in his psychological profile. Psychiatric examinations indicated his behavior had deep roots in his childhood. During his early years, Edwin displayed disturbing tendencies. He enjoyed killing chickens and dismembering chicks. He also had a habit of strangling dogs to death. These attitudes did not disappear with age. As a teenager, after being bitten by a mule on a farm, he reacted disturbingly by biting the animal back. During the trial, his conduct drew even more attention. He maintained a constant smile and cold expression, even when images of his niece and nephew were projected. For those who witnessed the proceedings, his attitude was disconcerting. The family's pain continues unabated. Janet and Wilson, devastated by the loss of their children, try to rebuild their lives, though they do so on separate paths. Wilson relocated to the municipality of Segovia, 6 hours from Medellin, where he attempts to start anew amid the heat of Antioquia's gold mining region. For him, the tragedy marked the end of everything he had built. It destroyed our lives. Everything ended. An illusion, a love. Everything was lost. Janet, on the other hand, remains in Itagüí. Although she has often felt the desire to flee and leave the memories behind, something keeps her there: the need to visit her children. Each week she returns to the place where she last saw them, convinced that somehow she can still feel their presence. The case of Andres and Tatiana Echeverry Pineda serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers lurk not in dark alleys or among strangers, but within the trusted circles of family itself. It demonstrates how the facade of normalcy can mask profound psychological disturbance, and how a single act of compassion, opening one's home to a relative in need, can sometimes have the most devastating consequences imaginable. This tragedy also stands as a testament to the meticulous work of forensic investigators, whose careful collection and analysis of evidence eventually exposed the truth behind a web of lies and deception, bringing at least some measure of justice to 2 innocent children whose lives were cut tragically short.